I used to think Lisa and I were stronger than most, but looking back now, I realize the cracks were there all along. I just refused to see them. I was 34 when this all began, living in Bristol, England, in a tidy little semi-detached house that always smelled faintly of rain and printer ink. I worked from home as a freelance graphic designer. My world was small, my desk, my sketches, the occasional client meeting. I liked it that way. My life was about focus and routine. Lisa was the opposite. She was 31, a marketing executive who thrived on the chaos of deadlines, presentations, and after-work drinks. She was all color and noise, while I was black and white. When we first met, I admired that about her. The way she could light up a room, make friends instantly, draw attention without even trying. She used to joke, "You're the anchor, David, and I'm the sail." It sounded romantic back then, but sails can pull you far from shore. In the early years, our differences balanced each other. She dragged me to parties. I grounded her on quiet Sunday mornings. But by 2017, things were shifting. Her late nights at the office multiplied. Her phone was always face down on the table, notifications silenced. She laughed too hard at texts she wouldn't show me. I told myself I was imagining things. My last relationship before Lisa had ended badly. Cheating, lies, and I promised myself I wouldn't let paranoia poison this marriage. But suspicion has a way of whispering to you in the dark, even when you beg it to shut up. The first time I heard the footsteps, I thought it was my imagination. It was a Thursday evening, rain tapping against the windows. I was at my desk upstairs when I heard it. Slow, steady steps in the hallway outside our bedroom. I froze. Lisa wasn't home yet. "Hello?" I called, my voice cracking. No answer. The steps stopped right outside the door. I opened it, heart pounding. Empty. Just shadows and silence. I told myself it was the old floorboards shifting with the weather. Houses make noises, right? But when it happened again and again, always just before Lisa came home late, I started to wonder if those cracks in the glass weren't just in my imagination. The thing about working from home is you spend too much time in your own head. You notice things others might miss. The way someone's laughter doesn't quite reach their eyes, or how their phone buzzes twice before they excuse themselves to take a call. Lisa's excuses were stacking up. One night she didn't get home until 2 in the morning. When I asked where she'd been, she tossed her coat on the sofa and sighed like I was a child asking too many questions. "Client dinner," she said. "We had a big pitch coming up. You want me to fail at my job because you're insecure?" Her tone stung, but what hurt worse was the way she laughed afterward. A cold, dismissive laugh. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the footsteps, the late nights, the secrecy, they didn't add up. One afternoon, she left her laptop on the dining table. She was in the shower, humming to herself. I told myself I wasn't going to snoop, but curiosity isn't a choice when your stomach is twisted in knots every day. I lifted the lid. Emails. Hotel bookings under her name. Not fancy business hotels, but small boutique places in Bristol. Friday nights. Always one night. Always 2 guests. When she came downstairs, towel wrapped around her hair, I confronted her. My voice shook as I read the names of the hotels out loud. "Who are you meeting at the Royal Inn every Friday?" Her reaction wasn't fear, wasn't guilt. It was amusement. She smirked. "You've really lost it, haven't you?" she said. "God, you're pathetic." Then she laughed. Laughed in my face like I was a joke. I stood there, humiliated, my hands trembling. That laugh cut deeper than the betrayal itself. Because in that moment, I realized she didn't even respect me enough to lie properly. The first time I saw him, I thought it was coincidence. A man leaning against a black car across the street from our house. Dark jacket, shaved head, broad shoulders. He didn't look like a neighbor. He didn't move for hours, just smoked cigarettes and watched. The next day I saw him again, outside the cafe where I sometimes worked, sitting 2 tables away, pretending to read a newspaper but never turning the page. By the third time, I knew it wasn't chance. Midnight. I was upstairs sketching when I glanced out the window. There he was again, standing across the street under a lamppost, face half hidden, watching the house. I told Lisa, "There's a man following us. I've seen him 3 times now." She rolled her eyes. "Not everything revolves around your imagination, David." But there was something in her expression I couldn't place. Not annoyance, not fear, something closer to satisfaction. She was hiding a smile. That night, the footsteps came again. Louder this time, not slow and cautious, but deliberate, heavy. And for the first time, they didn't stop outside the door. They rushed forward. I didn't even have time to stand before he was in the room. The man from the car, the man from the cafe. Muscular, eyes like stone, a knife glinting in his hand. And behind him, Lisa, not screaming, not shocked. Calm. My blood froze. "Lisa, who is he?" She looked at me with a coldness I had never seen before. "Someone who actually makes me feel alive." The man lunged. Instinct took over. I grabbed the nearest thing, a lamp, and swung. It shattered against his arm. He barely flinched. He drove me back against the wall, knife grazing my side. Pain exploded through me. "Stop," Lisa screamed, but not at him, at me. "Don't hurt him." We fought, crashing into furniture, blood smearing across the carpet. I heard my own voice shouting, raw and desperate, as I struggled against his weight. Somehow I kicked him off long enough to grab the phone and dial 9999. The sirens came minutes later, but to me, it felt like a lifetime. By the time the police burst in, I was on the floor bleeding, the stranger pinned against the wall by 2 officers. Lisa was screaming, but not for me. For him. The aftermath was a blur of stitches, bandages, and questions. The police told me the man had a record: assaults, theft, stalking, dangerous, unstable. And Lisa? She claimed she didn't know. But I'd seen the look in her eyes that night. She knew exactly who he was. She left the next morning. No apology, no goodbye. Just packed her things into 2 suitcases and walked out with him. I stayed. The house felt like a tomb, the air heavy with silence. But some nights when I worked late, I still heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, stopping right outside my door. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was trauma. Or maybe some cracks in the glass never really heal. Trust is the foundation of every relationship. But once broken, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. Ignoring red flags, silencing your instincts, or clinging to denial only deepens the cracks until everything shatters. Love cannot survive without honesty, respect, and safety. And sometimes the bravest choice is not holding on, but walking away before the footsteps reach your door. Seattle has a way of swallowing people whole. The rain doesn't fall. It lingers, clinging to your clothes, your skin, your thoughts. Our apartment overlooked the river, glass windows catching the reflections of ferries cutting through the sound. From the outside, Sophie and I looked like a couple in a magazine spread. Me, a software developer who thrived on routine. Her, a gallery consultant with perfect hair and an enviable smile. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of what I thought was stability. But cracks in glass don't always start loud. Sometimes they whisper. The first crack came when Sophie's phone never left her hand. She kept it face down, silenced, her thumbs moving quickly when she thought I wasn't looking. Then came the late nights, gallery events, art inspections, dinners with clients. At first, I didn't question it. She had a career that thrived on appearances. But slowly, her explanations grew thinner, her absences longer. One evening I asked, "Sophie, are you okay? You've been so distant lately." She laughed lightly, brushing her hair back. "I'm fine. You're imagining things. Just tired, that's all." I wanted to believe her. God, I did. I told myself I was paranoid, that her ambitions were pulling her in directions I couldn't always follow. But then I started noticing details I couldn't ignore. Receipts from places she never mentioned. perfume lingering in the air even when she claimed she'd gone straight from work to bed. A red scarf folded neatly on the couch, one I'd never seen before. One night, I woke at 2 a.m. to the faint hum of her voice on the balcony. She whispered into the phone, her tone low and warm, a softness she hadn't used with me in months. I listened, frozen in bed, my chest tightening. When she came back in, I pretended to sleep. I kept my breathing steady, but inside, something fractured. I wanted proof. I wanted certainty. Because the thing about betrayal is, it doesn't just hurt. It makes you question whether you've been blind your entire life. The night I followed her was the first time I realized the rain wasn't just weather, it was cover. She said she had a work dinner. She wore a black dress I'd never seen before, her lips red, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. "Don't wait up," she said, almost as an afterthought. I waited until she left, then slipped on my coat. The streets glistened under the sodium lamps as I followed from a distance. She walked quickly, heels tapping against the wet pavement until she reached a sleek black sedan parked near the corner. The driver stepped out, tall, older, well-dressed, with the kind of confidence that radiated danger. He opened the door for her, and she laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in months. She touched his arm as she slid inside. My stomach clenched. I trailed them to a restaurant downtown, a place I couldn't afford on my salary. Through the window, I watched them sit close, their hands brushing across the table. She leaned in as he whispered something that made her laugh again, softer this time. Private. That was the moment the truth settled in my chest like a weight. Sophie wasn't mine anymore. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I went home, drenched, shaking, my thoughts spiraling. Over the next week, I became a detective in my own marriage. Patterns emerged. The sedan always waiting near gallery events. Texts deleted before I could glance. The faint smell of cologne on her clothes when she came home late. But then things turned darker. Packages began arriving at our door. Expensive items, jewelry, designer scarves, even a watch, none of which I'd bought. When I asked Sophie, she shrugged. Clients send gifts, perks of the job, yet some packages had no sender, no notes, just quiet reminders that someone else was marking their territory. And then I saw him again. The same man, Damien, leaning against his car across the street from my office building. He didn't move when I saw him. He just watched, calm and certain, as if daring me to acknowledge him. That night, Sophie curled against me in bed, distant but present enough to keep the illusion. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how long she'd been slipping away, and how far she was willing to go. Once you notice a lie, you start pulling the thread, and soon, everything unravels. I started checking her phone when she left it unattended, though it was rare. Most of the time, it was locked, shielded. But once, while she was in the shower, I caught a glimpse. Messages cleared except for one. "Don't let him get suspicious, he's harmless." Harmless. The word echoed like a taunt. At work, Lena, my colleague, noticed my distraction. "You've been off lately," she said. "You okay?" I almost told her everything, but how do you explain that the person you built your life with has made you a ghost in your own home? I just smiled weakly. Just tired. Nights grew heavier. Sophie's words cut sharper. "Ethan, you're so rigid you'll never understand what I need. Don't make me miserable in this marriage." It wasn't just an affair. It was psychological warfare. She painted me as dull, predictable, incapable of keeping up with her hunger for excitement. Every time I tried to reach her, she pushed me further away, making me feel invisible, smaller. And Damien? He was everywhere. Passing by my office, standing at the grocery store across from our apartment. Once I came home to find him in the lobby, speaking casually with our neighbor Henry. He looked at me as if he owned the ground I walked on. I began to wonder, was this just about Sophie? Or was Damien pushing further, staking a claim in my life, not just my marriage? The nights grew colder. The rain outside the windows felt endless. And the silence between Sophie and me wasn't silence anymore. It was contempt disguised as calm. The night it all broke open was one of those storms that made the entire city flicker with power outages. The river outside churned under the wind, and our apartment was lit only by the dim glow of candles. I'd had enough. "Sophie," I said, standing in the middle of the living room. "I know about Damien. I've followed you. I've seen everything." She looked up from her glass of wine, unflinching. Her smile was small, almost amused. "You think knowing is enough? You can't stop what's already begun. You're too predictable." My fists clenched. "Why? Why him?" She tilted her head. "Because he sees me. He gives me what you can't. You live in your routines, Ethan. You're safe. But I don't want safe anymore." Before I could respond, a shadow moved at the edge of the candlelight. Damien stepped forward from the hallway, his presence filling the room. "Evening," he said smoothly, as though he lived there. My heart pounded. "Get out." He smirked, blocking the door. "Not until we settle this." The fight erupted fast. Chairs toppled, glass shattered. He was stronger, but desperation gave me an edge. I grabbed the nearest thing, Sophie's vase, and smashed it against the floor, shards scattering. He slipped, and in that moment I lunged, shoving him hard into the corner. I shouted for help, loud enough that Henry, our neighbor, rushed in. Damien cursed, staggering as Henry dialed the police. Sophie stood in the corner, arms crossed. Not a scream, not a tear, just silent amusement, as if watching a performance she had directed. When the police arrived, Damien was dragged out in handcuffs, charged with stalking and harassment. Sophie didn't defend him. She didn't defend me either. She just packed a bag the next morning and left, without a word. After Damien's arrest, silence filled the apartment. But it wasn't peace. It was aftermath. Sophie was gone. She left behind a few clothes, her books, and the faint smell of her perfume in the closet. No note, no apology, just absence. I tightened the locks, installed cameras. Every late-night knock made my heart jump. Every unfamiliar car idling outside sent a chill down my spine. Sometimes I'd swear I saw a black sedan across the street, headlights off, waiting. Henry checked in often. "You're stronger than you think," he said once. Maybe he was right, but I didn't feel strong. I felt emptied, gutted by betrayal that went deeper than infidelity. Months passed. I went back to work, tried to focus on code, on systems that made sense because people no longer did. I laughed occasionally with Lena, found small routines that made the days bearable, but at night, when the rain hit the windows, I remembered Sophie's words. "You'll never understand what I need." She was right. I never understood. Not her hunger, not her recklessness, not her cruelty. What I did understand, finally, was that love, real love, doesn't destroy. It doesn't leave you questioning your worth or fearing every shadow. Seattle rain never really stops. It lingers, soft and heavy, like the memory of betrayal. But it also washes. It teaches you that no matter how deep the cracks, the glass can be replaced. Slowly, carefully, with patience. I'm still rebuilding. Betrayal doesn't always arrive with screams or slammed doors. Sometimes it comes quietly, disguised as charm, validation, or excitement. But love that thrives on lies is not love at all, it's possession. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once broken, it takes more than apologies or passion to rebuild. Real love is steady, not manipulative. It gives strength instead of stripping it away. If you ever find yourself questioning your reality, your worth, or your safety because of someone else's actions, walk away. Because no marriage, no relationship, is worth losing yourself to. I used to think of my life as safe, maybe even predictable. A neat little package of morning routines, school drop-offs, and steady work hours. My name is Ryan Prescott, And for the longest time, I believed I had built something stable. A family, a home, a sense of order I never had as a kid. I grew up with betrayal baked into the walls of my childhood. My father had a knack for disappearing, always with another excuse, another lie. Sometimes it was business trips that didn't exist. Sometimes it was women who weren't my mother. The fallout was brutal, and trust became something I never gave away lightly. So when I married Vanessa, I thought I had beaten the odds. She was ambitious, magnetic, the kind of woman who could light up a room at a networking event or family barbecue. We had 2 kids together, Emily, 5, and Noah, 3. They were my anchor. When I tucked them into bed each night, I felt a peace I never thought possible. Our townhouse on Maplewood Drive looked like every suburban dream. A lawn I kept trimmed on Saturdays, bikes leaning against the garage, toys scattered across the backyard. It felt like safety. But looking back, maybe I mistook appearances for truth. Vanessa worked in marketing, which meant long hours and plenty of events. I didn't question it. I was busy too, working as an IT consultant. Our schedules overlapped enough that we needed help, so we hired Sophie, a college student from down the street. At 22, she was bright, eager, and our kids adored her. She was practically family. For years, I convinced myself things were fine, even when little details started nagging at me. Vanessa's phone buzzing late at night, nights when she came home smelling like perfume that wasn't hers, or when Sophie seemed oddly nervous around me, as if hiding something. I told myself it was nothing. Paranoia. Ghosts from my childhood. Then came that Friday evening in late August. I left work early, wanting to surprise Vanessa. The sky outside was heavy with storm clouds, thunder rolling in the distance as I pulled into the driveway. Inside, the house was too quiet. No cartoons, no laughter, no footsteps of kids running across hardwood. My chest tightened. I climbed the stairs and pushed open the bedroom door. And there they were. Vanessa, sitting cross-legged on the bed, glass of wine in hand. Sophie beside her, laughing nervously. And Nathan Cole, a man I'd never met before, lounging casually against the headboard like he owned the place. For a moment, no one spoke. My world tilted. "Ryan," Vanessa said, amusement flashing across her face. "You're home early. Didn't expect this." I stood frozen in the doorway. "What the hell is going on here?" She smirked. "Relax. We're just having a little fun. Don't worry, the kids are fine." But I wasn't reassured, because the house was silent, eerily silent, and when I rushed downstairs, there were no toys scattered, no sign Sophie had been watching Emily or Noah at all. That night was the first time I realized something much darker was happening in my home, and that the person I trusted most might be the one pulling the strings. After that night, nothing felt real. Vanessa brushed it off, acting like I'd walked in on a harmless hangout. "You're overreacting," she said, pouring another glass of wine. Sophie looked too frightened to speak, and Nathan left without a word. My gut screamed something was wrong, but Vanessa's calm demeanor made me question myself. The following weeks only deepened my unease. Strange social media posts began appearing, photos of Vanessa and Sophie at bars, captioned "Girls' Night Out." Even on nights Sophie was supposed to be babysitting. CPS showed up at our door one Tuesday afternoon after an anonymous report of child neglect. The inspector asked me pointed questions about my drinking habits, my temper, my ability to supervise the kids. I answered them all, but the seed of doubt had been planted. At work, colleagues hinted at rumors. "Everything okay at home, Ryan?" they'd ask, too casually. My own family started calling with concern, saying they'd heard I was struggling to keep up with the kids, that maybe I was overwhelmed. It didn't take long to realize the whispers had a source, and that source was inside my own house. One night, after putting the kids to bed, I confronted Vanessa. "The CPS report," I said, standing in the doorway of the kitchen. "That was you, wasn't it?" She didn't even look up from her phone. "Why would I do that? Maybe someone's jealous of us. You know how it is." You're lying, I snapped. I know you are. Finally, she raised her eyes, calm as ever. Ryan, you're imagining things. You've been stressed for months, maybe you need help. Her words chilled me. It wasn't just denial, it was gaslighting. She wanted me to doubt myself, to believe the narrative she was feeding everyone else. That was the moment I realized I couldn't fight this alone. I needed proof. Hard proof. I hired a private investigator named Mark Delaney, ex-cop, mid-50s, gruff voice that made it clear he'd seen worse than my situation. I gave him everything, times, names, my suspicions. 2 weeks later, he came back with evidence that made my blood run cold. Vanessa and Nathan had been involved for months. Sophie wasn't just a bystander, she was part of their plan. Together they'd staged photos and videos, Sophie pretending to be overwhelmed while watching the kids, Vanessa setting up scenarios that made me look negligent. Nathan had even coached Sophie on how to act in front of cameras, creating a trail of evidence that painted me as unstable and unfit. They're building a case, Mark told me over black coffee in a downtown diner. If this goes to court, they'll say you're unfit to have custody. They'll say you're dangerous. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles went white. Why? Why would she do this? Mark shrugged. Power, control. Maybe she wants out of the marriage but doesn't want to lose the kids. Maybe it's just the thrill. Some people like to watch others burn. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Vanessa wasn't content with ordinary. She needed excitement, chaos, and destroying me gave her both. Armed with Mark's recordings, photos, and testimony, I started planning my own move. But Vanessa wasn't slowing down. Anonymous calls escalated. Neighbors reported seeing me yelling at the kids, incidents that never happened. I started sleeping on the couch, checking the locks 3 times a night. Everywhere I turned, the ground felt less solid. I decided to set my own trap. At a family dinner one Sunday night, Vanessa playing the perfect mother, Sophie smiling stiffly at the table. I hit record on my phone, tucked neatly into my shirt pocket. When the kids ran upstairs to play, I leaned back and said, I know everything, Vanessa. The babysitter, Nathan, the photos, the CPS calls. It's over. For a split second, her mask slipped. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. Do you? She said softly. Or are you just imagining it again? Everyone already thinks you're unstable, Ryan. That's the beauty of it. You can scream the truth all you want, but no one will believe you. Sophie's fork clattered against her plate. Nathan, who had joined us uninvited, chuckled under his breath. I kept my voice steady. I've recorded everything. The lies, the manipulation. It's over. The silence was heavy. Then Vanessa laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. You think winning means anything? She said. People already see you as the bad guy. I'll disappear, and you'll pay for doubting me. That night, she packed a bag. Sophie followed. Nathan was already waiting outside in his car. They left without looking back, leaving Emily and Noah sleeping upstairs as if they were pieces of luggage too heavy to carry. For the first time in weeks, the house was quiet, and I was alone with the children, the only part of my life that still made sense. The private investigator's files saved me. When CPS came again, I handed them the recordings, the photos, the documentation Mark had compiled. Slowly, the tide began to turn, but the damage was deep. Neighbors still looked at me with suspicion. Friends were cautious, unsure what to believe. Even family took time to understand the full scope of Vanessa's manipulation. Emily and Noah were the ones who suffered most. They cried for their mother, asking when she'd be back. I didn't know how to answer. All I could do was hold them close and promise they were safe. Weeks passed. Therapy sessions helped, though some nights I still woke up in a cold sweat, expecting another anonymous call, another knock on the door. Vanessa sent cryptic messages from untraceable numbers. You'll never really be free. Don't get too comfortable. But I kept moving forward. I couldn't let her shadow define me. My kids needed a father who could protect them, who wouldn't collapse under the weight of betrayal. It's strange How quickly trust can shatter. How someone you share a bed with can turn into your enemy without warning. I'm still learning how to live with that. But one thing is certain, I will never again confuse appearances for truth. They say every marriage looks perfect from the outside. People see the smiling photos, the curated vacations, the little dog wagging its tail in the yard, and they assume life behind closed doors is just as spotless. For years, Julia and I were that couple. We had the house in Northeast Portland, modest but stylish, with a garden she insisted we keep Instagram-worthy. We had Bailey, our golden retriever, who was probably the only truly happy soul under our roof. And we had the appearance of stability. 10 years together, a solid partnership, the kind of life our friends envied. But appearances are fragile. All it takes is a shift, a crack, one thing out of place. For us, that was my job. In 2018, I lost my position as an IT consultant after a round of layoffs. On paper, it shouldn't have been catastrophic. I had savings, freelance options, time to rebuild. But Julia looked at me differently after that. She didn't say it outright, but I could feel her respect slipping like water draining through a sieve. She started working longer hours. Her job in digital advertising had always been demanding, but suddenly, client dinners kept her out until midnight. She traveled more. She posted glossy selfies with captions like, "Late nights, endless possibilities." At first, I asked gently, "Are you seeing someone else?" She laughed in my face. "You're ridiculous. You're imagining things. Focus on your work." Her dismissal stung, but what hurt worse was how easily she said it. No hesitation, no fear, like she'd rehearsed it. I told myself I was paranoid. After all, I've always been meticulous, controlling even. I like routines, predictability. Maybe I was projecting my insecurity onto her. Maybe the problem was me. But then her phone started buzzing at odd hours. Quick texts she deleted before I could glance at the screen. Business trips that didn't line up with her company's calendar. And the way she smiled when she thought I wasn't looking. Smiled at something far away. Someone else entirely. That's when the crack became impossible to ignore. Suspicion is a dangerous thing. It eats at you slowly, like rust under paint, until all that's left is a corroded shell. I tried to suppress it, but every time Julia came home late, every time she silenced her phone, the rust spread. One rainy Thursday, I decided to stop wondering and start watching. I followed her. It wasn't hard. She wasn't exactly trying to hide, at least not from the world. She left in her silver SUV, saying she had a networking dinner downtown. I gave her 10 minutes, then grabbed my jacket and slipped into the car. Portland in winter is forgiving for a man trying not to be seen. Foggy streets, slick roads, headlights reflecting off wet pavement. I trailed her across the river, through quieter streets, past downtown lights, until she turned onto an industrial stretch on the outskirts of the city. Warehouses lined the road, most of them abandoned or half-shuttered. She parked beside one, killed her lights, and waited. I watched from down the block, heart pounding. Then he appeared, tall, confident. Dark jacket, the kind of swagger that comes from knowing you're dangerous. They embraced like old lovers, his hand slipping easily to the small of her back. She laughed. God, she laughed in a way I hadn't heard in years. They disappeared into the warehouse, leaving me in the car with my hands clenched so tight around the wheel my knuckles went white. I stayed until they returned an hour later, whispering, laughing, kissing in the shadows. My stomach churned. This wasn't just an affair. It was deliberate. She wasn't just cheating. She was living another life entirely. I drove home that night numb, 100 questions spinning in my head. Who was he? How long had this been going on? And worst of all, how much of our life together had been a lie? The next morning, Julia breezed into the kitchen, humming, pouring coffee as if nothing was wrong. I stared at her across the table, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the woman I'd watched in that warehouse. For the first time, I realized I didn't know who I was married to anymore. I told myself I needed proof, evidence, something undeniable. Confrontation without it would only end with her laughter, her gaslighting, her smile that said, "You're crazy, Mark." So I began collecting. Photos, videos. I followed them again, recording from a distance. I captured their embraces, their whispered exchanges. My hands shook as I replayed the footage, each frame driving the knife deeper into my chest. But then the tables turned. One night, as I pulled into our driveway, I noticed a black car idling across the street. Its headlights glared at me like eyes. Inside, a silhouette sat perfectly still, watching. The next night, the same car appeared outside the grocery store while I loaded bags into my trunk, and again outside my gym, though I hadn't seen Julia all day. Then the text arrived. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it. You know what she can do." My blood went cold. The number was anonymous, the tone unmistakable. Liam. That was the name I'd overheard Julia whisper in the warehouse. He wasn't just her lover. He was watching me. I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house, every knock at the door jolted me upright. I started checking the locks 3-4 times a night. Bailey barked at shadows, and I found myself barking back, nerves frayed to the point of breaking. Julia noticed. "You look terrible," she said one morning, smirking over her coffee. "You should get some rest." I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shout, "I know everything." But fear held me back. Not fear of losing her. I'd already lost her, but fear of what she and Liam were capable of together. I wasn't just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my life. It happened on a Saturday night, the rain hammering against the windows, the city outside muffled in fog. I couldn't take it anymore. The evidence was enough. The fear was too heavy. I had to confront her. She was sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone, Bailey curled at her feet. I stood in the doorway, my fists clenched. "It's over," I said. My voice surprised me, steady, calm. "I know about Liam. I followed you. I have everything on video." She looked up slowly, then smiled. A cold, calculated smile. "Do you really?" she said. "Or are you just imagining revenge?" Before I could answer, a shadow moved in the corner of the room. Liam. He stepped out from the dark hallway, broad shoulders filling the space, a grin on his face. "Evening, Mark," he said, voice low and smooth. My stomach dropped. He'd been here the whole time. I backed toward the door, but he was faster. He lunged, slamming me against the wall. Pain shot through my ribs. I fought back, shoving, swinging, anything to break free. Bailey barked wildly, but Julia just stood there, watching, smirking. The scuffle was messy, desperate. I managed to grab a lamp and smash it across Liam's arm, enough to stagger him. Blood trickled down my face, my vision blurred, but instinct pushed me forward. I bolted for the door, stumbling into the rain. Behind me, I heard Julia's voice, not panicked, not scared, but sharp and angry. "Don't let him go." That voice burned worse than any bruise. I spent the night at a friend's apartment, bandaging cuts, shaking with adrenaline. By morning, I went to the police. At first, they doubted me. Cheating spouses, domestic disputes, they've heard it all. But when I showed them the videos, the texts, the recordings, their expressions hardened. They took me seriously. Within weeks, Liam was arrested. Assault, stalking, a rap sheet longer than I'd imagined. But Julia, she slipped through their fingers. By the time the police came knocking, she was gone. Social media wiped clean, accounts deleted, no forwarding address. It was as if she'd never existed. I kept the house. Bailey needed stability, and so did I. But the walls felt hollow. Rain against the windows reminded me of fists against my ribs. Every knock at the door made me flinch. Even now, years later, I still glance over my shoulder when I walk through Portland's foggy streets, half expecting to see Julia or someone she sent. People ask why I don't start dating again, why I don't move on. They don't understand. When the person you trusted most uses love as a weapon, betrayal leaves scars deeper than any knife. I survived. But survival doesn't mean peace. Love built on lies is a cage, not a home. Ignoring red flags, silencing your instincts, or clinging to appearances only gives manipulators more power. True love demands honesty and respect. Without it, you're not a partner, but a prisoner. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, even if it means stepping into the storm alone. I never thought a house could feel like a stranger. When Megan and I first moved into 47 Willow Crescent, it felt like the kind of place people romanticize. High ceilings, a wide staircase with polished banisters, and a fireplace that seemed to promise cozy winters. A Victorian, old bones but charming, the kind of house you imagine filling with kids and laughter. 7 years later, it felt haunted, and not by ghosts. Megan and I had been married long enough to have collected habits more than memories. She was 35, a freelance interior designer who thrived on creativity, long hours, and the admiration of her clients. I was 38, a software engineer whose life ran on routine. Coffee at 7:30, code review at 9, takeout Thai on Fridays. Where she loved spontaneity, I found comfort in predictability. A year ago, Megan confessed she'd cheated while on a business trip in Seattle. His name was Leo Hawkins, 40, a marketing consultant. She swore it was brief, a fling that meant nothing. She wept at our kitchen table and told me she loved me, that she wanted us. I grew up in a house poisoned by lies. My father's cheating had torn my parents apart, and I promised myself I'd never repeat that story. So I forgave her, not because I trusted her, but because I wanted to believe forgiveness was stronger than suspicion. But shadows linger. It started small, calls at 12:30 a.m., silence at first, then heavy breathing, then my name, whispered low and unsettling. I thought it was some prank until I noticed the scratches on the back door, thin claw-like marks around the lock. Probably raccoons, Megan said, her laugh too casual. But raccoons don't whisper my name. I installed cameras. For a week, nothing. Then one night I saw Megan outside beneath the street lamp, speaking with a tall man in a black coat. I watched her hand him something metallic, a key. I confronted her the next morning, trying to mask my panic. "Where were you last night?" I asked. "At the studio," she said, pouring coffee like we weren't standing on a cliff's edge. "Your phone shows you across town." She smiled faintly. "Anthony, you're reading too much into this. You don't need to worry about me." Her calmness made me doubt my own eyes, but the seed was planted. I started noticing everything. Her vague explanations, the way she slipped her phone face down on the table, her new habit of leaving the house dressed better than usual. One morning during a run by the bay, I noticed someone trailing me. A man, always a block behind. When I slowed, he vanished. That night, muddy footprints appeared beneath our bedroom window. I should have left right then, but I didn't. I told myself I needed proof. Proof so undeniable it couldn't be brushed off with a smile. That was my mistake, because by then, Leo Hawkins was already back in Megan's life, and forgiveness had bought him a front row seat into mine. Suspicion is like a crack in a window. At first, it's small. You tell yourself it's nothing, but every day, with every gust of wind, it spreads. I started digging. I followed Megan once, discreetly, pretending to stay late at work, but really trailing her cab across the city. It stopped at a high-rise overlooking the bay, Leo's penthouse. She didn't hesitate before walking inside. That night, she came home at 2 a.m., smelling faintly of whiskey. "Client emergency," she said again, slipping out of her heels. I just nodded, my chest a tight knot. At work, I started receiving anonymous envelopes. No return address. Inside, photographs. Me leaving the house, jogging by the water, sitting in traffic. Each note included a message scrawled in thick black ink. "You don't deserve her. She was mine first. You can't protect her from me." I knew it was Leo. The man wasn't just having an affair with my wife, He wanted me to know. He wanted me afraid. One night I tried to confront Megan calmly. "Are you still seeing him?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best effort. Her eyes didn't flinch. "No, I told you that's over." "Then why do I keep finding lies?" She set her glass down hard enough to crack. "Because you don't trust me, Anthony, you never have." Her ability to flip the blame left me speechless. I sat in silence while she stormed upstairs. Alone in the kitchen, I stared at the half-empty wine glass and realized I wasn't fighting for her anymore. I was fighting for a marriage she'd already abandoned. The phone calls grew more frequent. Always 12:30. Sometimes just breathing, sometimes whispers. "She's not yours. You don't know what she wants." Sleep became impossible. I checked locks twice, 3 times. I dreamed of footsteps outside the door. My body lived in a state of permanent adrenaline, waiting for the moment Leo would stop taunting and finally act. And yet part of me still couldn't let go. Forgiveness had turned into obsession. If I left, it felt like admitting defeat. If I stayed, I might lose everything, including my life. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday night. I returned home early from work and heard voices upstairs. Megan's voice, low and soothing. A man's voice, deeper, sharper. My chest locked as I climbed the stairs. Leo was standing in my bedroom. Broad shoulders, sharp suit, eyes that burned with the thrill of being caught. Megan stood between us, pale and trembling. "Anthony," Leo said smoothly, like we were old friends. "I was just visiting." "In my house?" My voice cracked. He smiled. "Your house. Her house. It's all the same, isn't it?" I lunged before I even realized what I was doing. My fist caught his jaw, but he barely staggered. He shoved me hard, sending me into the dresser. Megan screamed. "You think you can keep her?" Leo roared, his face twisted with rage. "She was mine before you ever laid eyes on her." Megan grabbed his arm. "Stop, Leo." But he threw her aside like she was nothing. I scrambled up, blood running down my temple. For a moment I thought he'd kill me. His hands curled into fists, his eyes wild. But then he stepped back, laughing. "Not tonight. You're not worth the jail time." He left the house with Megan chasing after him. I collapsed onto the floor, my chest heaving, the room spinning around me. That was the night I realized forgiveness had become a weapon. She wasn't protecting me, she was protecting him. And I was just the fool standing in the middle of their twisted game. News spreads fast on Willow Crescent. Neighbors whispered when they saw the broken lamp through the window, the blood on my shirt, Megan storming out with Leo. She never came back. Not to pack, not to explain. Just gone. The following week, I moved into a small apartment in the Mission District. 2 rooms, cracked walls, the faint smell of smoke from the taqueria downstairs. It wasn't home, but at least it was mine. The letters didn't stop, though. One arrived taped to my door, a photo of Megan laughing with another man at a bar. Scrawled beneath it, "She'll never be yours." She was never anyone's. I realized then that Leo wasn't Megan's only danger. She chased thrill like oxygen, and men like him would always circle her. She'd abandoned me, but not the chaos she thrived on. I changed my number. I avoided the bay, avoided the house, avoided the past. But safety never came. I checked locks 3 times every night, slept with the light on, flinched at every phone buzz. Forgiveness hadn't freed me. It had chained me to a ghost. Months passed. I rebuilt, piece by piece. Therapy, long walks, work that numbed my brain. I told myself the worst was over. Then one night another envelope slid under my apartment door. Inside, a single photograph. Megan, smiling, her arm wrapped around a stranger I didn't recognize. The handwriting at the bottom chilled me. Round 2. I sat in silence, the photo trembling in my hands. The shadows had followed me here. That's when I finally understood. Evil doesn't always knock down your door in the form of monsters. Sometimes it slips in quietly, wearing a smile, asking for forgiveness. And sometimes when you grant it, you invite it to stay forever. Forgiveness is powerful, but blind forgiveness can destroy you. Trust is not rebuilt by ignoring lies, but by confronting truth. When we choose to look away from red flags, we give dangerous people permission to control us. Love cannot survive without honesty, and forgiveness without boundaries becomes weakness. Protect your peace, even if it means letting go of the person you once believed you couldn't live without. I've always believed that truth is fragile, not truth itself, but the trust that surrounds it. My father taught me that the hard way. He was a man who told lies so casually that by the time my mother realized the depth of his deceptions, money gone, friends betrayed, it was too late to fix what was broken. He left us with nothing but debts and suspicion. So when I married Lily 10 years ago, I promised myself I would never allow lies to rot us from the inside. I wanted a marriage built on solid ground, not shifting sand. And for a while I believed I had it. We bought a brownstone at 214 Chestnut Street in Boston's Beacon Hill neighborhood. Cobblestone streets lined with gas lamps, mist curling around in the early mornings like something out of a painting. Lily loved the history of it, the way the old wood creaked under our footsteps. She said the place had character. I agreed. I worked as an investment analyst. Long hours, plenty of numbers, plenty of pressure. Lily worked as an art curator, always darting between gallery openings, fundraisers, and private showings. She was magnetic at those events, the kind of woman who could light up a room with her laugh. I admired that about her. Maybe envied it too. But somewhere in the last year, small things began to shift. Lily's phone was always on silent. Her explanations for late nights were vague, and sometimes she returned home with that look in her eye, distracted, distant, like she was keeping a part of herself locked away. I told myself not to overthink. I had a history of suspicion, and I knew how easy it was to spiral. So I bit my tongue, swallowed my doubts, and kept moving. But then one evening, walking home later than usual, I cut across the street and happened to glance up at the second-floor window of our neighbor's house, Norman Briggs. And that's when I saw her. Lily, sitting on Norman's couch, her hand resting in another man's. She was laughing, leaning toward him with that smile I thought belonged to me alone. I froze on the sidewalk, breath caught in my throat. The sight burned into my mind like a photograph I couldn't tear up. My stomach twisted as I turned away and stumbled back to our brownstone, hands shaking. That night when Lily came home, she kissed me on the cheek, kicked off her shoes, and asked what I wanted for dinner. She acted as if nothing had happened, and I sat there staring at her, wondering if my life had just cracked open like my father's once had. After that night, I couldn't stop watching her. From the study on the second floor, I had a clear view across the street into Norman's windows. I knew it was wrong, spying on my own wife, but I couldn't let go of what I'd seen. Every evening, I sat there in the dark, peering through the blinds, waiting for some sign. Sometimes Lily appeared in those windows again, sometimes not. But whenever I thought I caught her silhouette, she seemed off, distracted, as though she were acting for someone else. Inside our own home, strange things began to happen. Objects misplaced, her scarf draped over a chair I knew she hadn't used, books moved from my desk, faint whispers at night that made me jolt awake. I told myself it was stress, overwork, paranoia creeping in, but deep down I wasn't sure. Finally I asked her. "Lily," I said one night as she poured herself a glass of wine, "are you seeing someone?" Her expression didn't change. She didn't even flinch. "Thomas," she said carefully, setting the glass down, "you're imagining things again. Maybe you need to take a break from work stress." I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded and let it go, for the moment. But my suspicions grew heavier with each passing day. I found myself drawn back across the street, this time not just watching. One late night, when the neighborhood was quiet, I crept over to Norman Briggs's house. He was an odd man, reclusive, rarely seen except for late-night walks with his cane and his muttered conversations with no one in particular. People called him eccentric. The back door gave way too easily, and inside the house, dust and clutter coated everything. But what stopped me cold were the walls. Dozens of photos, all of Lily. Some at gallery events, some outside our brownstone, and some, God help me, intimate, private moments inside our home. Photos that had been digitally altered to place her with men I didn't recognize, including the one I thought I had seen her with. My blood turned to ice. Looking for something? The voice came from behind me. Norman Briggs stood in the doorway, eyes glinting, his smile wide and unhinged. "You think you know your wife, Thomas," he said softly, "but I've been watching, planning. She's mine in the story I wrote." I confronted Lily that night. My words came out like shards of glass. "I saw the photos. In Norman's house, did you know?" She went pale, her wine glass slipping from her hand and shattering on the floor. "What photos?" she whispered. When I explained, her eyes filled with tears. "Thomas, I swear to you, I never. Whatever he has, it's not real. I didn't know." And part of me believed her. But another part, the scarred part from my father's lies, ached with doubt. Norman had engineered something grotesque, a false affair, fabricated with doctored images and careful staging. But the genius of it was how it fed into my existing suspicions. He didn't just want Lily, he wanted me broken. The following days blurred. I tried reporting him, but Norman was meticulous. The police found nothing criminal in a house full of artistic projects. Without hard evidence, there was nothing they could do. Meanwhile, the whispers continued. Colleagues at work had heard rumors about Lily. Friends asked careful questions, their eyes full of judgment. Norman's poison was seeping into every corner of my life. Then the threats began. Notes slid under our door. "Stay out of my story, Thomas." Our locks tampered with, subtle enough to make me question my memory. I began sleeping with a baseball bat by the bed, every creak of the brownstone setting my nerves on edge. I couldn't live like that anymore. I hired a digital forensic specialist, someone who could dig into Norman's files, trace the manipulations, expose the lies. What he uncovered was staggering. Hacked social media accounts, photoshopped images, even fake surveillance footage. Norman had spent years weaving this web, long before I ever suspected Lily. His fixation wasn't just on her, it was on me. He wanted to dismantle my life piece by piece to prove he could rewrite my story the way my father once rewrote our families. The final confrontation came one stormy night. I went back to Norman's house, this time with the police behind me, armed with the evidence the specialist had gathered. Inside his apartment, the walls were worse than before. Not just photos of Lily now, photos of me. My routines mapped out in obsessive detail. When they cuffed him, Norman didn't resist. He just looked at me with a smile that chilled me to my bones. "You can lock me up, Thomas," he said, "but the story isn't over. It never ends." Norman was arrested, but the damage was done. Lily and I stayed together, though the shadow of suspicion still lingered between us. I wanted to believe her, to trust her again fully, but every time her phone buzzed in the night, my chest tightened. I started therapy, hoping to untangle the mess Norman left behind. The nightmares are frequent. Images of Norman watching from across the street, of Lily's laughter in someone else's arms. Weeks after his arrest, I received a letter, postmarked from the state correctional facility. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. "Dear Thomas, stories never really end. They just pause between chapters. I'll be seeing you again." I tore it up, but the words stayed etched in my mind. Now, every misty morning on Chestnut Street, I glance at Norman's darkened windows, half expecting to see him there again, watching, waiting. They say family is the anchor that keeps you steady when the storms roll in. That was always my dream. A stable home, kids who felt safe, a marriage that lasted longer than my parents did. I grew up watching my mom and dad tear each other apart in courtrooms and custody hearings. I swore to myself I would never let that happen to my family. Stability. That was my religion. When I met Claire in college, she was like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. She was bold, adventurous, the kind of girl who convinced me to skip studying to drive up into the mountains at midnight just to watch the stars. She thrived on chaos, but back then, I thought it was charming. I was the cautious one, the engineer who measured twice before cutting once, the guy who lived by schedules. I thought we balanced each other. We got married young. Ethan came first, then Lily, and for a while it really did feel like the dream was working. We bought a cozy house in Boulder, surrounded by trees and hiking trails, the kind of place where you know the neighbors' names and kids ride bikes on the sidewalk. I built routines around the kids, bedtime stories, Saturday pancakes, Sunday hikes. Claire said she wanted adventure, but I figured family life would mellow her, anchor her. I was wrong. By our 10th year together, the cracks started to show. Claire began spending nights out with friends. She posted pictures online from parties I wasn't invited to. She was the kind of woman who craved attention, who thrived when people were watching. I kept telling myself it was harmless. I made excuses. She's just blowing off steam. She's still young at heart. The breaking point came one night when she asked me to try swinging. Against every fiber of my being, I said yes, thinking maybe it would satisfy her. Maybe it would keep us together. I hated it. She loved it. I stopped after one time, but she didn't. She called me boring and controlling, like my desire for stability was some kind of cage. I should have seen the writing on the wall then. Instead, I doubled down on being the responsible one. I kept the house running, took care of the kids, made sure bills were paid, and she slipped further away, like sand running through my fingers. The real warning came from someone I never expected, Amy Collins, my childhood friend. We'd grown up on the same street, walked to school together, drifted apart in college, but kept in touch over the years. Amy knew me better than most, maybe better than Claire ever tried to. One rainy evening in the spring of 2018, Amy asked to meet for coffee. I thought it was just to catch up, but the moment I saw her face, I knew it was something else. "Daniel," she said, stirring her drink, "I need to tell you something. It's about Claire." My stomach tightened. "What about her?" "She's been bragging," Amy said carefully. "To friends, to people I know. She's sleeping around, more than one guy. And she's been talking about money. Your money. She said something about planning a way out, maybe even divorce." I stared at her, numb. "That doesn't sound like Claire." Amy gave me a look. "You've always wanted to believe the best in her, but you can't ignore this anymore." That night I went home in a fog. Claire was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, glass of wine in hand. She looked up at me and smiled like nothing was wrong. I wanted to believe Amy was mistaken, but once you hear something like that, you start to see everything differently. I noticed the receipts first. Fancy dinners at places we'd never gone together. Then the phone calls she took in the bathroom, the quick deletions of messages. A bottle of wine I hadn't bought tucked in the trash. When I confronted her gently, trying not to start a war, she smirked. "Claire," I said, "I know you've been meeting someone else. Is that true?" She didn't even blink. "You're imagining things again. Stop being paranoid." It was the same trick she always used. Make me doubt myself. But this time I couldn't shake the feeling that she was preparing for something bigger, something worse than just affairs. And the kids, Ethan and Lily, were starting to notice. Ethan asked me one night, "Why isn't Mom home for dinner anymore?" Lily cried when Claire left with a suitcase and didn't come back for 2 days. That's when fear turned into resolve. I couldn't let Claire's chaos destroy the only thing that mattered more than my pride, my children. I tried to be civil. I tried to talk. But Claire wasn't interested in saving our marriage. She wanted to win. When I pushed harder about her drinking, her absences, her secret spending, she flipped the script. Suddenly, she was the victim. She started telling neighbors that I was controlling, even abusive. She raised her voice in public arguments, making me look like the aggressor while she played the wounded wife. One night, she called the police after a fight we had about the kids being left alone. She told them I shoved her. I hadn't even touched her. Luckily, I'd started recording our conversations on my phone. I played the audio back for the officers, which proved she was lying. They left, but the look she gave me afterward was chilling, like I'd ruined her perfect play. I realized then that Claire wasn't just reckless. She was dangerous. If she could convince the world I was an abuser, she could take Ethan and Lily from me. She could ruin everything. So I fought fire with fire. I recorded everything. I saved receipts, messages, witnesses. Amy became my ally, keeping track of Claire's nights out and the things she bragged about to mutual friends. The house became a battlefield. Claire would vanish for days, then return acting like nothing was wrong. The kids clung to me, confused and frightened. I tucked them in at night with promises I wasn't sure I could keep. But deep down, I knew what was coming. A custody battle. A fight for the very soul of our family. And I knew Claire would do anything to win. By the time I filed for custody, I was running on fumes. Work, kids, legal paperwork. It was survival mode. Claire showed up to court polished, smiling, pretending to be the perfect mother. Her lawyer painted me as controlling, unhinged, even abusive. But I had evidence. I played recordings where she admitted to leaving the kids alone, to spending our money recklessly, to drinking until she blacked out. Amy testified about Claire's bragging, her nights out, her neglect. The judge listened carefully, eyes narrowing as the truth came out. When Claire tried to cry on the stand, her story unraveled under cross-examination. Finally, the judge's gavel came down with words I'll never forget. Daniel Hartman will have sole custody of Ethan and Lily. Claire Hartman's visitation will be supervised. The weight lifted off my chest was indescribable. Relief, sadness, exhaustion. It all hit at once. Claire stormed out of the courtroom, her eyes full of venom. She checked herself into a mental health facility shortly after, though whether it was voluntary or forced, I never found out. All I knew was that, for the first time in years, I felt like my kids were safe. Life didn't return to normal overnight. The kids struggled with the absence of their mother, and I struggled with the memories of what we'd gone through. There were nights I woke in a sweat, dreaming that Claire had come back to take them, that the judge's words had been erased. But slowly we built something new. I cooked meals with Ethan and Lily. We hiked the trails together. We laughed again. I became both parents, and though it was exhausting, it was worth it. Claire tried to contact us a few times, but the court made sure it was supervised. I didn't block her completely. I wanted the kids to have some connection, if only to remind them that her chaos wasn't their fault. But I never let her near them without boundaries. Years later, I still feel her shadow sometimes. In quiet moments, I wonder if she'll show up again, trying to reclaim what she lost. But I don't live in fear anymore. I live in truth. And I've learned that stability isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's about fighting for what matters, even when it means facing the darkest parts of someone you once loved. Love without respect will always collapse, no matter how strong it looks on the outside. Ignoring red flags only delays the damage, and trying to fix someone who thrives on chaos will only drag you down with them. Protecting your children, your peace, and your truth sometimes means letting go of the person you thought you needed most. Stability isn't found in holding on, it's found in knowing when to let go. If you had asked me 3 years ago what I feared most, I would have said failure. I've always been meticulous about details, reports, presentations, even grocery lists. Anxiety runs in my family, and for me, it manifests in double-checking everything, making sure life doesn't spiral into chaos. For a long time, I believed that vigilance was enough to keep things stable. What I didn't realize is that chaos doesn't always come from outside. Sometimes it grows quietly, right inside your home. I met Emily at a design conference in Seattle, back when she was still freelancing on small projects. She had this restless energy, like she was always on the edge of something bigger. I was a marketing executive, steady and detail-obsessed, the kind of guy who carried a planner everywhere. She made me laugh at myself, taught me to loosen up, to live outside of schedules. I thought we balanced each other perfectly. For 8 years, I believed we did. Our condo at 58 Pineview Terrace overlooked Lake Union, and in summer, the sunsets painted the water gold. We'd sit on the balcony with wine, talking about her latest projects and my work campaigns. Life felt comfortable, until the comfort began to crack. It was small at first, late-night texts on her phone, numbers I didn't recognize. When I asked, she said, "Clients, brainstorming sessions don't follow a 9-to-5 schedule." Her smile disarmed me, and I forced myself to believe her. But names like D or Shadow didn't sound like clients. Then came the night I followed her. She told me she was heading to her studio downtown, but instead, she slipped into a black SUV parked near the condo. I expected the car to pull away, but it didn't. It stayed, engine idling, lights off, as if waiting for me to make a move. 20 minutes later, it drove off. Too smooth, too deliberate, like someone staging a scene. That's when the fear started creeping in. Not just fear of losing her, but fear of something larger, something orchestrated. Within weeks, I began noticing strange signs. Videos of me arriving at work appeared in anonymous emails. Notes showed up on our doorstep. Handwritten messages like, "We see you," or "Careful what you ignore." At first I thought it was coincidence, maybe a prank, but the notes became personal. They mentioned my morning jogs by the lake, my favorite coffee shop, even the brand of sneakers I wore. One night I found her studio laptop abandoned near the pier, screen glowing faintly with open design files. "Emily, why was your laptop out by the pier at midnight?" I asked. She smiled, tilting her head like I was being silly. "You're imagining things. Sometimes I work wherever I can get inspiration." I wanted to believe her. God knows I tried. But the truth is, when you already struggle with anxiety, doubt doesn't just knock, it moves in. Every sound in the night, every flicker of headlights outside the condo became a signal that I was being watched. And I was. I just didn't know yet that the person orchestrating it all was the same woman I kissed goodnight every evening. The stalking escalated in ways I couldn't ignore. Packages I didn't order appeared at work. Gadgets, odd trinkets, even a burner phone wrapped in black tape. My coworkers whispered about the weird deliveries. My boss pulled me aside, asking if I was okay. I lied through my teeth, saying everything was fine, but my hands shook during meetings. At home, Emily played the role of supportive wife. She rubbed my shoulders, reminded me to breathe when panic hit. But the phone kept buzzing at odd hours, and she always angled the screen away. I confronted her one night while rain pattered against the windows. "Why do I keep finding things I can't explain?" I asked. She put down her wine glass, her face calm, almost rehearsed. "Ryan, you've been under so much pressure. With your anxiety, it's easy to connect dots that don't exist. You need to trust me." Trust me. 2 words that cut both ways. I hired a private investigator. His name was Griffin, a wiry man with tired eyes who'd seen too many messy marriages. I gave him everything: the SUV sightings, the notes, the laptop by the pier. He listened, scribbled in a notebook, and finally said, "If she's hiding something, we'll find it." 3 weeks later, Griffin called me into a diner booth and dropped a folder on the table. Inside were photographs of Emily with a man I didn't recognize at first. Tall, dark hair, sharp features. His name was Derek Stanton, Griffin explained, a driver with a background in tech security. He wasn't just Emily's lover. He was the one orchestrating the stalking. The SUV was his. The notes, the videos, even the emails. Derek was creating chaos around me while slipping into Emily's arms. I stared at the photos until my vision blurred. Why? I asked, voice barely audible. Griffin sighed. Because when people want to cover an affair, sometimes they build a bigger distraction. You're not just being cheated on, Ryan. You're being played. The betrayal was layered. Not only had Emily broken our vows, but she'd allowed someone to weaponize my anxiety to make me doubt my own sanity. That night I confronted her. My hands trembled as I asked, "Why are there videos of me? Is this about the affair?" She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned against the counter, eyes cold. "You never really noticed me, Ryan. Maybe now you'll pay attention." It was the kind of answer that burned more than denial. After that night, reality itself began to twist. Emails were sent from my accounts that I didn't write. Coworkers received strange messages from me. Packages I never ordered arrived weekly, some harmless, some bizarre, like a child's toy smeared with red paint. I knew it was Derek's doing. His tech skills made him invisible, always one step ahead. And Emily? She gaslit me at every turn. "Ryan, you're paranoid," she said one morning, brushing her hair in the mirror. "Maybe you should talk to your therapist about upping your meds." She said it sweetly, but her smile was razor sharp. One night I followed her again. She slipped into the condo's underground parking garage. I stayed far enough back to avoid being seen. When I turned the corner, I saw her pressed against Derek, kissing him like I never existed. I stepped forward, my voice breaking. "Emily!" She spun, her face flashing with annoyance more than guilt. "This is your fault," she spat. "Your suspicion made him hostile. Do you see what you've done?" Her words hit like a hammer. She wasn't even trying to deny it. She was rewriting the story, making me the villain. I felt like the ground had vanished beneath me. Piece by piece, the puzzle fell into place. The stalking, the SUV, the notes. It wasn't random. It wasn't paranoia. It was Emily and Derek together, orchestrating everything. I confronted her one final time in the condo, the city skyline glowing through the windows. My voice cracked but stayed steady. "You set this up, all of it. Me, the SUV, the videos, everything." Emily smirked, her eyes glittering with something colder than hate. "I told you to trust me. Maybe now you'll understand that some people lie to survive boredom." Boredom. That was her explanation. Years of love, trust, and support, shattered because she wanted excitement. I didn't hit her, I didn't scream, I just walked away. Because in that moment I realized nothing I said would matter. She wasn't the woman I married. She was a stranger who had worn Emily's skin. I moved out the next morning. Took only essentials, clothes, laptop, books. I left the condo, the balcony, the sunsets. They belonged to ghosts now. Emily disappeared for weeks. Cryptic emails arrived in my inbox. Half-finished sentences, strange phrases like, "still watching" or "not done yet." Derek vanished too. Whether they were together or not, I didn't care anymore. I took time off work, checked into therapy, tried to reclaim pieces of myself. Anxiety still stalks me, but now I know the difference between fear born in my head and fear planted by others. Some nights, I walk by Lake Union and watch the boats drift lazily across the water. Life feels quieter now, but I move cautiously. Not just because I fear another Derek or Emily, but because I know how easily reality can be bent by someone you trust. The scariest part isn't that she betrayed me. It's how deeply she made me doubt my own sanity. That's a wound slower to heal than any broken heart. If you ask me what my greatest flaw is, I'd tell you it's trust. I grew up believing that people meant what they said, that love could survive on patience and loyalty, and that if you gave someone your heart, they'd protect it the way you protected theirs. For most of my life, that belief served me well. As a history professor, I spent years teaching my students about betrayals on the grand stage, kings who lied to their people, nations that broke treaties. But I never imagined betrayal would walk through my own front door. My wife, Clara, was a nurse, compassionate, gentle, admired by her patients and co-workers alike. That's what drew me to her 12 years ago when we met at a fundraiser. I was lecturing about the legacy of public health programs during the Depression, and she was volunteering at the event. She had this easy smile, the kind that made you feel like you'd known her forever. Within 2 years, we were married. For over a decade, life felt steady. We had our cozy apartment on Hawthorne Lane, a view of the river if you leaned just right out the window, and a rhythm to our days. I taught classes, graded papers, and spent evenings reading. She worked long shifts at St. Vincent's, sometimes overnight, sometimes double shifts. When she dragged herself home in the early morning light, I'd make her tea and rub her shoulders. But by late winter of 2024, things had shifted. My father had a massive heart attack, the kind doctors call a widowmaker. He survived, but just barely. Suddenly, much of my time was spent at the hospital, sitting by his bed, watching the monitors beep, and listening to the slow hiss of oxygen. Clara was supportive, at least on the surface. She offered to adjust her shifts, to check on him when I was lecturing. I thanked her, never suspecting what she was really doing on those nights. The first crack appeared one rainy evening. My father's condition had taken a sudden turn, and the hospital called me in. The corridors were dim, the smell of antiseptic thick in the air. As I walked toward the ICU, I saw Clara down the hall. She wasn't with my father. She wasn't with any of her assigned patients. She was slipping quietly into another room. I stopped, confused. Nurses go into different rooms all the time. Maybe she was helping. That's what I told myself until I saw him. Dr. Felix Monroe, a cardiologist at the hospital. Tall, charming, the kind of man whose confidence filled a room. He followed her in, and when he thought no one was looking, he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't the kind of kiss you give a coworker after saving a patient. It was familiar, practiced, intimate. My heart sank into my shoes. I stood frozen in the hallway, watching my marriage crack open like a fault line. That night when we were home, I tried to be calm. The rain drummed against the windows, the glow of the streetlight spilling into our living room. "Clara," I said softly, "what I saw tonight, is there something I should know?" She blinked, too quickly, then forced a smile. "Ethan, it was a mistake. A stupid moment. Please, I don't want this to ruin us." Her words were quick, rehearsed. I wanted to believe her. God help me, I did. But as I sat across from her, watching her sip tea like nothing had happened, something deep inside whispered that this was only the beginning. For weeks I tried to carry on as if nothing had changed. I told myself Clara had slipped, that people make mistakes, that maybe stress and exhaustion had pushed her toward Monroe. I wanted to forgive, to salvage the life we'd built. But the universe doesn't let you hide from the truth for long. It started with a bill. A charge for medication under my name. Medication I'd never taken. At first I thought it was an insurance mix-up. Hospitals screw up paperwork all the time. I called the provider, who confirmed the prescription had been filled at the hospital pharmacy. When I pressed, they grew vague. "Perhaps your wife picked it up on your behalf." Then another bill arrived, and another, all in my name. Medications, procedures, even small claims tied to patients I'd never met. At the same time, I noticed Clara becoming distant. She'd leave late at night saying she had extra rounds, or that Monroe needed her help with a research paper. She came home tired, distracted, her phone buzzing with messages she never let me see. When I confronted her about the bills, she brushed it off. "You're imagining things," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "Maybe you're just stressed with your father being sick. Let me handle everything, Ethan, trust me." Her words were a knife twisted into my chest. Trust me. Trust had been the foundation of our marriage. Without it, what were we? I started checking our bank account. Money was missing. Transfers I didn't make, withdrawals I couldn't explain. When I asked Clara, she told me she'd been paying off credit cards or covering family emergencies. But when I pressed for details, her answers unraveled. At night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me, I wanted to believe in her, to hold on to the woman I'd married. But the evidence kept stacking, brick by brick, walling me off from the man I used to be. One rainy evening, unable to stand the uncertainty, I hired a private investigator. His name was Carson, a retired cop with a gruff voice and sharp eyes. I gave him everything I had, bills, statements, fragments of suspicion, and asked him to find the truth. When Carson called me 2 weeks later, his voice was grim. "Ethan, your wife isn't just cheating. She's running a scheme. Insurance fraud, falsified prescriptions, embezzlement. And Monroe, he's not just her lover, he's her partner in crime." My knees buckled as I listened. The affair wasn't about passion. It was about power. Money. A web of deceit spun right under my nose. And by staying loyal, by signing papers without question, by being the trusting husband, I was part of it. Unwittingly, I'd become an accomplice. The confrontation happened in our apartment late at night, rain hammering against the windows. I sat at the kitchen table with the documents spread in front of me. Bank statements, emails, even testimony Carson had gathered from patients. Clara walked in, setting her bag down like it was any other night. "Clara," I said, my voice trembling but steady, "we need to talk." She looked at the papers, then at me. Her smile didn't falter. "Ethan, what is all this?" "You've been lying," I said. "The prescriptions, the money, Monroe. I know everything." For a moment she said nothing. Then she laughed, a cold, hollow sound that chilled me to the bone. "You always wanted to believe in the good," she said. "That's your weakness. You think love is enough to blind you from the truth." My hands shook. "Clara, this isn't love. This is fraud. You've been using me." Her eyes hardened. "And you let me. You signed everything without looking. You believed every excuse. You made it easy, Ethan." I felt sick. The woman I had shared 12 years with, the woman I had trusted with every vulnerable part of myself, stood before me like a stranger. That night the mask came off completely. Clara wasn't compassionate, wasn't gentle. She was ambitious, ruthless, and I was just collateral damage in her climb. Clara didn't stay after that night. Within a week she was gone. Clothes missing, bank account drained, no forwarding address. Dr. Monroe vanished too, leaving behind only whispers in the hospital hallways. For months I lived under the shadow of investigation. The police questioned me, the insurance companies grilled me, colleagues eyed me with suspicion. I was cleared legally thanks to Carson's evidence, but the stain lingered. My reputation cracked. My students whispered. Friends stopped calling. I'd walk along the river on rainy nights, staring at the dark water, wondering how my life had unraveled so quickly. Trust had been my strength, but it had also been my downfall. The apartment on Hawthorne Lane felt like a grave. Every corner reminded me of her, the sound of her laugh, the smell of her shampoo, the way she used to curl up on the couch. I boxed everything up, left the keys on the counter, and moved into a smaller place closer to campus. But even then I couldn't escape. Some nights I'd wake to the phantom buzz of her phone, the echo of her voice saying, "Trust me. It's been 2 years since Clara left, but the scars remain." I still walk the river trails watching the rain blur the lights of Portland. I still hear my father's voice telling me, "Son, love is supposed to lift you up, not break you down." Clara taught me something I wish I'd never learned. Betrayal isn't always about love. Sometimes it's about greed, ambition, the hunger for power. And the people who betray you the deepest are the ones you'd least suspect, the ones you trusted with your whole heart. I've rebuilt my life in fragments. Teaching helps. Writing lectures, guiding students, finding comfort in history's lessons. My father passed away last year, but before he went, he told me he was proud I hadn't let bitterness consume me. That means more to me than anything. Still, every time I hear the rain against my window, I think of that night at the hospital, when I first saw Clara slip into Monroe's arms. That was the moment my life split into before and after. And though she's gone, the echo of her betrayal lingers, like the rain that never truly stops in Portland.